Have you ever felt like life offers second chances in the most unexpected ways? This is the story of Evan Harper, a man who seemed to have it all but lived with a shadow from his past, and Mira Blake, a woman running from debts she didn't create but couldn't escape. Their lives crossed one rainy night, and what followed changed everything. Evan Harper was the epitome of success, a self-made millionaire, living in a sprawling mansion with no one but his own thoughts for company. To the world, he had it all: power, wealth, and control. But beneath the surface, he was haunted by a memory he couldn't shake, a moment that, no matter how hard he tried, refused to be buried. It was a night years ago, drenched in rain, filled with fire, fear, and a life he couldn't save. That moment shaped him into the man he was today, detached, calculating, and entirely focused on never losing control again. Then there was Mira Blake, a young woman with fire in her eyes and the weight of the world on her shoulders. Mira wasn't running from her past, she was sprinting. After her parents' passing left her drowning in debt, she had nothing but her art and a tiny silver necklace her mother had given her. Each day, she sketched with desperate determination, hoping to sell enough to survive, all while looking over her shoulder for the creditors chasing her down. Their worlds couldn't have been more different, yet fate had other plans. One night, as rain poured down in relentless sheets, Evan's car halted at a red light. He glanced out the window, not expecting to see anything of note. But there she was, a woman, drenched to the bone, sitting on the sidewalk with a sketchbook in hand. She wasn't begging for help, though. No sign, no plea. Just her, a pencil, and the glow of a streetlight illuminating a drawing that seemed to breathe life on paper. For a moment, Evan looked away, ready to drive off the moment the light turned green. But something about her held him there, frozen in place. The determination in her expression, the quiet desperation in her posture, it struck a chord in him. He didn't know why. But he couldn't look away. When the light turned green, his foot hesitated on the gas pedal. He drove forward but didn't get far. A few blocks down the road, he pulled over abruptly, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. His pulse quickened as he tried to make sense of the sudden pull in his chest. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. Yet, before he could convince himself otherwise, he turned the car around. When he reached the spot, she was still there, now shielding her sketchbook from the rain with her jacket. He rolled down the window and called out, "You, come here." Mira looked up, startled, her expression a mix of suspicion and exhaustion. She hesitated, clutching the sketchbook like it was her lifeline. Evan's tone left no room for negotiation. "Now." "I don't have all night." Reluctantly, she stood and approached the car. Rain dripped from her hair as she leaned down to meet his cold, calculating gaze. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weariness in her eyes. Evan studied her in silence for a moment before replying, "Get in the car. We need to talk." Mira let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. "I'm not some lost soul waiting for a savior. Mister, move along. This isn't a negotiation." But Evan shot back. "Get in, or go back to sitting in the rain. Your choice." She froze, torn between mistrust and the chilling truth in his words. With a reluctant sigh, she opened the door and climbed in, her soaked clothes dripping onto the leather seat. The silence between them was thick as Evan pulled away from the curb, his jaw tight and his mind racing. Mira clutched her sketchbook tighter, glancing at him warily. "You still haven't told me what this is about." "You'll find out soon enough," he replied, his tone calm but firm. And with that, two lives, seemingly worlds apart, began a journey neither of them could have ever predicted. The silence in the car was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic patter of rain on the windshield. Mira sat stiffly, her fingers gripping her sketchbook like it was her last defense. She didn't trust him, this man with a sharp suit and a sharper gaze. But there was something about him, an authority that left her with no choice but to follow. Still, she couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion that this wasn't going to end well. They pulled into the parking lot of an upscale cafe tucked away from the main streets, It was quiet, warm light spilling from the windows and contrasting sharply with the storm outside. Evan stepped out of the car, not even glancing back as he expected her to follow. Mira hesitated before stepping into the rain once more, her worn sneakers squelching against the wet ground as she trailed behind him. Inside, the air smelled of fresh coffee and baked goods, but Mira barely noticed. Evan gestured toward a private corner booth, his expression unreadable. She slid into the seat, arms crossed defensively, as he ordered for both of them without even asking what she wanted. It irritated her, but she kept quiet. She needed to figure out why she was here first. Evan leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a puzzle to be solved. Finally, he broke the silence. "What's your name? Why does it matter?" She shot back, her tone sharp. "I'm not staying long enough for introductions." Evan smirked faintly, as if amused by her defiance. "Humor me, Mira. Meet up, Lake." She relented, her eyes narrowing. "And you are?" "Evan Harper." His name carried weight, though she didn't react. If she knew who he was, she didn't let it show. He leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Tell me, Mira, why were you sitting on that sidewalk in the rain, drawing like nothing else in the world existed?" She shrugged, her gaze drifting to the window. "What else is there to do? Life doesn't exactly give you breaks when you need them." Evan tilted his head, intrigued by her bluntness. "No family? No one to help you?" Her jaw tightened, and she turned back to him with a glare. "Family isn't always a safety net. Sometimes they leave you with nothing but debts and regrets." He nodded thoughtfully, as if he understood more than he let on. "Fair enough, but I think you already know why you're here, Mira." She frowned, her suspicion growing. "No, actually, I don't. Care to enlighten me?" Evan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "I want to make you an offer." Mira's laugh was dry, almost bitter. "An offer? From a man I just met, who dragged me out of the rain like some lost puppy." "Sure, let's hear it." "I want you to have my child," he said plainly. The words hit her like a blow, and she blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me. To us, you heard me," he continued, his tone calm and matter-of-fact. "I'm offering you a chance to change your life. I'll cover all your expenses, pay off whatever debts you have, and give you a substantial sum once the child is born. In exchange, you'll carry my child. No strings attached after the birth." Mira stared at him, her mind reeling. This had to be some kind of sick joke. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Completely," he replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I have no interest in relationships or emotional entanglements. I need an heir, and you. You need a way out." Her laugh was sharper this time, edged with anger. "A way out? Is that what you think? That I'm so desperate I'd sell my body for a paycheck?" Evan didn't react to her outburst, his expression as controlled as ever. "I think you're a survivor, and survivors know when to take an opportunity." Mira pushed back from the table, her heart pounding. "This is insane. No woman in her right mind would agree to something like this. No woman in your position would refuse." Evan countered, his voice low and steady. "You're drowning, Mira, and I'm throwing you a lifeline. The choice is yours." She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You're out of your mind if you think I'd even consider this." Evan's gaze followed her as she turned to leave. "Think about it," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You have 24 hours. After that, the offer's off the table." Amira stormed out, her thoughts racing. The audacity of that man. Who did he think he was? She stepped into the rain, letting it soak through her clothes as she tried to push his words from her mind. But no matter how hard she tried, they echoed back, louder with each passing moment. "You're drowning, and I'm throwing you a lifeline." That night, Mira sat on a park bench, staring at the city lights blurred by the rain. Her mind replayed every moment of the conversation, every cold, calculated word he had spoken, It was absurd, insulting, and yet, was it her only chance? The debts she carried weren't just numbers, they were chains, tightening around her with every passing day. The calls, the threats, the humiliation. They would never stop, not unless she found a way to break free. Her fingers brushed the necklace at her throat, the last gift from her mother. "What would you do, Mom?" she whispered to the night. Her mother had always said life's hardest decisions were the ones that shaped you. But was this the right choice? Could she really give up so much for a shot at survival? Across the city, Evan sat in his study, reviewing the contract his lawyers had prepared. It was flawless, airtight, leaving no room for complications. Just the way he liked it. And yet, for the first time, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. What if she said no? What if he had read her wrong? He brushed the thought aside. Mira Blake needed him, and he needed her more than she realized. The next evening, as Evan sat in his study, the intercom buzzed. His assistant's voice came through. "Mr. Harper, Miss Blake is here." Evan's heart quickened, though his face remained impassive. "Send her in." The door opened, and Mira stepped inside, rain still dripping from her hair. Her expression was hard, but her eyes held a determination he hadn't seen before. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. But on one condition. Evan leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "And what's that?" Mira lifted her chin, her hand brushing the necklace at her throat. "I keep this, no matter what happens." Evan's gaze flicked to the necklace, a faint glimmer of recognition flashing in his eyes before he nodded. "Deal." The contract lay waiting on the desk. Mira hesitated only a moment before picking up the pen and signing her name, sealing a decision that would change both their lives forever. The next few weeks brought Mira into a world she never could have imagined. From the rain-soaked streets to Evan's sprawling mansion, every detail of her new surroundings felt surreal. The grand hallways, the towering ceilings, the marble floors, everything seemed too pristine, too perfect, and far too distant from the life she had known. But Mira wasn't here for the luxury. She reminded herself of that every day. She was here to fulfill a contract, to repay a debt far greater than any sum of money could cover. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not by Evan, he was rarely around, but by the house itself, its walls heavy with secrets. Evan, true to his nature, kept their interactions brief and professional. He gave instructions through his assistant or through short, direct conversations. Meals were provided at specific times. A schedule of medical appointments was meticulously prepared, and Mira was encouraged to rest. But she wasn't used to being taken care of, and it made her restless. One day, while wandering through the mansion, she stumbled upon a door she hadn't noticed before. It was locked, its heavy wood and iron handle standing out against the polished elegance of the house. Something about it drew her in, a strange pull she couldn't explain. When she asked Stephanie, Evan's assistant, about it later, the woman hesitated before replying. "It's a private space," Stephanie said carefully. "Mr. Harper prefers not to discuss it." That only made Mira more curious. Weeks turned into months, and Mira began to notice small but significant changes in her life. The medical appointments became more frequent as her pregnancy progressed, and with them came an unexpected revelation. She was carrying twins. The doctor's words hung in the air like a shockwave. "Twins?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Evan, standing at the foot of the examination table, remained composed, though a flicker of something crossed his face. Surprise, concern, whatever it was, he masked it quickly. "That changes nothing," he said simply, but his tone carried an edge of tension. For Mira, however, it changed everything. The knowledge that two lives were growing inside her added weight to an already impossible situation. She began to feel a connection she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just a transaction anymore. These were her children, even if she wasn't meant to keep them. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her hand rested on her growing belly, and tears pricked her eyes. "How am I supposed to let them go?" After she whispered, her voice cracking. Meanwhile, Evan found himself in unfamiliar territory. He had always prided himself on control over his life, his business, and every interaction he allowed. But Mira was different. She was unpredictable, stubborn, and entirely unyielding in ways he hadn't anticipated. And then there were the twins. The idea of not one but two children challenged the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. Late one evening, unable to sleep, Evan wandered into his study. The door to his locked room loomed in the corner, a constant reminder of the past he had tried so hard to bury. He stared at it for a long moment before turning away, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. Memories of that night, of rain, fire, and the fragile lives he had saved flooded his mind. Mira, too, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Evan than he let on. His cold demeanor seemed to hide something deeper, something unresolved. Her curiosity led her back to the locked door. This time, she couldn't resist. Late at night, when the house was silent, she returned with a bobby pin, her heart pounding as she worked at the lock. It clicked open, and she pushed the door ajar, stepping into a dimly lit room. What she saw took her breath away. The walls were lined with shelves, filled not with books but with artifacts, photographs, trinkets, and a large sketch framed at the center of the room. It was old, slightly faded, but unmistakable. Mira's heart raced as she recognized the drawing, a crude but heartfelt depiction of a car and two figures standing in the rain. It was hers, a sketch she had drawn as a child after surviving the accident with her mother. Her breath hitched. "Why does he have this?" she whispered. Before she could process it, she heard footsteps. She spun around to see Evan standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Why do you have this?" she demanded. Holding up the sketch, Evan hesitated, his usual composure faltering. "Because I was there." Mira froze. "What do you mean you were there?" He stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on the sketch. "The night of the accident, I pulled you and your mother out of that car before it exploded. I didn't think you'd survive, but you did." Her knees nearly buckled as the weight of his words sank in. She had always wondered about the man who had saved them, the one who disappeared before they could thank him. And now, here he was, the same man who had changed her life once before, now offering her a chance to change it again. The revelation left Mira reeling. She returned to her room, her mind spinning with questions. Was this all a coincidence? Or had fate somehow intertwined their lives in ways neither of them could escape? And what did it mean now, knowing that the man she was carrying children for had already saved her life once before? For Evan, the confession brought its own set of complications. He had never intended for her to find out, never wanted to revisit that night. But now that she knew, he couldn't deny the connection that had always been there, even if he had buried it deep. The next morning, they crossed paths in the hallway. For the first time, Mira looked at him not with suspicion but with something else, gratitude, mixed with uncertainty. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. Evan hesitated before replying. "Because I didn't think it mattered. But maybe it always did." Though Mira didn't respond. But as she walked away, a new thought took root in her mind. Perhaps their meeting wasn't random. Perhaps there was something bigger at play. Something neither of them fully understood yet. The revelation of their shared past created an invisible thread between Mira and Evan. But it also raised questions neither of them were ready to answer. Mira felt conflicted, grateful for the man who had saved her life, but wary of the man who now held so much control over it. Evan, on the other hand, found himself grappling with emotions he had long buried, feelings he had vowed never to revisit, but life offered no time for clarity. As Mira's pregnancy advanced, so did the weight of her internal battle. The twins were no longer abstract ideas. Every kick, every flutter reminded her that they were real, that they were hers, even if the contract said otherwise. One evening, while sketching in the garden, Mira overheard Stephanie, Evan's assistant, speaking on the phone. Her tone was urgent, almost panicked. Mira couldn't hear every word, but one phrase stood out: "We have to handle this discreetly. If the press gets wind of this..." Her heart sank. Was Evan hiding something else? Was she just another secret he needed to control? She clenched her fists, her mind racing with possibilities. Later that night, Mira confronted Evan in his study. He looked up from his desk, his expression neutral, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. "What's going on?" "Flighty," she demanded. "Stephanie was talking about something you're trying to hide. Is it about me? About the twins?" Evan leaned back in his chair, his calm demeanor intact. "It's nothing for you to worry about." "Nothing for me to worry about?" she echoed, her voice rising. "I'm carrying your children. Evan, I think I have the right to know if there's something I should be concerned about." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "It's about the press. They've been digging into my past, trying to uncover anything they can use. I've kept my life private for a reason, and I intend to keep it that way." Mira narrowed her eyes. "Your past? Or ours?" Evan's gaze hardened. "You mean the accident?" She nodded, her heart pounding. "You saved me, Evan. You saved my mother. Why would you want to hide that?" "Because it's not just about saving you," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "That night, I was running from my own failure. I couldn't save my father. I couldn't stop him from ending his life, and I've carried that guilt every day since. Saving you and your mother was the only thing I could do. But it wasn't enough. It never is." Mira stared at him, her anger softening into something else. "Pity? Understanding?" She wasn't sure. "You've been punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault," she said softly. Evan's jaw tightened, and he looked away. "It doesn't change the facts. My life is built on control, Mira, and control is the only thing that keeps me sane." The conversation hung between them like a fragile thread, ready to snap at any moment, but Mira couldn't dwell on it for long. The next morning brought a new challenge. While Mira was taking a walk in the garden, a black car pulled up to the mansion. She froze as two men stepped out, their faces grim. She recognized them instantly, the creditors she had been running from for months. Panic surged through her as they approached. "Miss Blake," one of them said, his tone falsely polite. "We've been looking for you." She backed away, clutching her belly instinctively. "I don't have anything for you." "Oh, we're not here for money," the other man said with a smirk. "Not yet. Anyway, we just wanted to remind you that running doesn't make the problem go away." Before she could respond, Evan appeared at the top of the steps. His presence was commanding, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "What's going on here?" The men turned to him, their confidence wavering. "This is a private matter. Mr. Harper, nothing to concern yourself with." Evan descended the steps slowly, his eyes cold. "She's under my protection. If you have a problem with her, you have a problem with me. And trust me, you don't want that." The men exchanged uneasy glances before retreating to their car. As they drove away, Mira let out a shaky breath, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. Evan was at her side in an instant, steadying her. "Why didn't you tell me about them?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger and concern. "I thought I could handle it," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want to drag you into my mess." Evan's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to handle it alone anymore, Mira. Not with the twins, not with anything." That night, Mira found herself in the room with the locked door once more. But this time, it was Evan who opened it for her. Inside, she saw the artifacts again, the photographs, the trinkets, the sketch she had drawn as a child. But Evan showed her something new, a small box tucked away in the corner. He opened it to reveal a collection of letters, all written by his father. "These were the last things he left me," Evan said quietly. "They're full of advice, dreams, regrets. I've read them 100 times, trying to understand him. But the truth is, I've spent my life trying to be everything he wasn't. Amira picked up one of the letters. The ink faded, but the words still legible. And what if that's not what you need to be? She asked gently. What if you just need to be you? Evan didn't respond, but something in his eyes shifted. A wall had cracked, just slightly, and Mira saw the man beneath the armor. Over the next few days, their dynamic began to change. Evan became more present, joining her for meals and asking about the twins. Mira, in turn, began to trust him more, sharing stories about her parents and her struggles. For the first time, they weren't just two people bound by a contract. They were something more, but the looming presence of the twins' birth hung over them like a storm cloud. Mira knew the agreement. She knew what she had signed. But the thought of letting go of the babies, of leaving them with Evan and walking away, was becoming unbearable. And Evan, for the first time, he questioned whether the plan he had so carefully constructed was the right one. The twins were meant to be his heirs, a legacy he could control. But now, they were more than that. They were his connection to Mira, to a life he had never thought possible. Neither of them said it, but they both felt it. Something had to change, and soon. As the months passed and Mira's due date approached, the atmosphere in the mansion grew heavier. Conversations between Mira and Evan became charged with unspoken truths, their shared moments filled with an intensity neither could fully acknowledge. For all their growth, the contract still loomed over them, a silent reminder of the arrangement that bound their lives together. One late evening, Mira stood on the terrace, gazing at the darkened horizon. The cool breeze brushed against her face, but it did little to calm the storm brewing inside her. She placed her hands on her growing belly, her heart aching at the thought of what was coming. How could she leave these children behind? How could she pretend this was just a transaction when every fiber of her being screamed otherwise? Evan found her there, his presence quiet but commanding as always. He stepped beside her, the silence between them stretching as the weight of their shared reality settled over them. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice low. Mira let out a soft laugh, devoid of humor. "What is there to say?" He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "Plenty." She turned to face him fully, her emotions bubbling to the surface. "Do you even care? Evan? Or are you still trying to convince yourself this is just about the contract?" His expression faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly masked it. "This is what we agreed to. Mira, this is what you wanted." "So what I wanted," she repeated, her voice trembling with anger and sadness. "What I wanted was to survive. What I didn't expect was to feel this," as she placed a hand on her belly, her voice breaking. "They're not just your children, Evan. They're mine too." Evan didn't respond immediately, his jaw tightening as he absorbed her words. Finally, he spoke, his tone soft but firm. "Do you think I don't feel it too? That I don't think about what this means every single day? I'm not as cold as you think." "Mira," she scoffed, tears brimming in her eyes. "Then what are we doing?" "Evan, pretending this is just a deal when it's so much more." For once, he had no answer. The tension between them reached its breaking point the next day. Mira had made up her mind. She couldn't stay in the mansion any longer. If she did, she feared she'd never be able to let go of the twins or of Evan. She packed her belongings into a small bag, her hands trembling as she zipped it shut. The memories of her time there flooded her mind, the moments of vulnerability, the unexpected kindnesses from Evan, the growing connection she couldn't ignore. But it didn't matter. The contract was clear, and she had no place in this world once the babies were born. As she descended the grand staircase, she found Evan waiting in the foyer. His eyes darkened when he saw the bag in her hand. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "I can't stay," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "You know that as well as I do." Evan stepped closer, his presence towering. "No, I don't know that. What I do know is that you're running again, just like you always do." Her gaze hardened. "And what about you, Evan?" Hiding behind control, pretending you don't feel anything. That's not running? His jaw clenched, and for a moment, she thought he might let her go. But then, to her shock, he pulled out the contract, the very one they had both signed months ago. Without a word, he tore it in half, the sound ripping through the air like a thunderclap. Mira stared at him, stunned. "What are you doing?" "I'm ending this," he said, his voice unwavering. "Not the way you think. I don't want you to leave, Mira. Not because of some contract or arrangement, but because I need you. I need you here, with me. With them." Her breath hitched as his words sank in. "Evan." He took another step closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "You're right. I've been hiding. I've been scared of what it means to feel, to let someone in. But you've changed that. You've changed me, and I'm not going to let you walk away without a fight." Tears streamed down Mira's face as the emotions she had been holding back finally broke free. "How do I know this is real? Evan, how do I know you won't push me away again?" He reached out, taking her hands in his, "Because I've already tried living without feeling anything for anyone, and it left me empty. But with you, with them, I feel alive, and I'm willing to prove it to you every single day if you'll let me." The room fell silent, the weight of his confessions settling over them. Mira searched his eyes, looking for any trace of doubt, but found none. For the first time, she saw the man beneath the armor, the man who had saved her life all those years ago, the man who was now fighting to save them both. She dropped her bag, her shoulders shaking as she let out a sob. Evan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as the walls they had both built around themselves crumbled. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations. Mira stayed, not as part of a contract, but as part of a family they were slowly building together. The twins were due any day now, and the mansion buzzed with anticipation. One night, as they sat in the nursery, Evan reached for her hand. "Have you thought about names?" he asked. She smiled softly, her heart full for the first time in years. "I thought that was your decision." He shook his head. "No, this is something we should do together." Mira glanced at the cribs, imagining the two little lives that would soon fill them. "What about Grace?" "For the girl. It was my mother's name." Evan's eyes softened. "Grace it is." "And for the boy?" she asked. He hesitated for a moment before replying, "Matthew, after my father." Mira squeezed his hand, understanding the weight of his choice. Matthew and Grace, it's perfect. The love that had grown between them wasn't something either of them had planned. It wasn't neat or easy, but it was real. And as they sat there, hand in hand, they knew that the future, no matter how uncertain, was theirs to face together. The night of the twins' arrival was nothing short of chaos and magic. Mira awoke to a sharp pain, her breath catching as the realization hit her. It was time. She called for Stephanie, who immediately contacted Evan. Within moments, he was at her side, his usually calm demeanor replaced with a mix of urgency and nervousness. "We're going to the hospital now," he said, taking her hand as she tried to steady her breathing. The car ride was a blur of flashing city lights and Mira's labored breaths, but through it all, Evan never let go of her hand. His grip was firm, grounding, a silent promise that he was there and wasn't going anywhere. The delivery was long and grueling, but when the first cry echoed through the room, Mira felt a wave of relief and overwhelming love wash over her. The doctor smiled warmly. "It's a girl," he announced, gently handing the baby to Mira. Her eyes filled with tears as she held her daughter for the first time, her tiny fingers curling around Mira's trembling hand. Before she could fully process the moment, the second cry followed. "And a boy," the doctor said, placing the newborn in Evan's arms. For the first time, Mira saw tears in his eyes as he looked down at his son, the weight of the moment breaking through the walls he had spent years building. Mira glanced at Evan, her voice barely a whisper. "Matthew and Grace," she said, "their names a testament to the love and pain that had brought them to this moment." Evan nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Matthew and Grace, The following weeks were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, quiet moments of joy, and an unspoken promise between Mira and Evan. They weren't just two people bound by circumstance anymore. They were a family. One evening, as the twins slept peacefully in their cribs, Evan found Mira in the nursery. She stood by the window, her arms crossed as she gazed out at the stars. He walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked softly. She leaned back into him, her voice quiet. "I never thought I'd have this, a home, a family. Love. It feels unreal." He turned her gently to face him, his eyes holding hers. "It's real, Mira. And I promise, for as long as I live, I'll make sure you never feel like you have to fight alone again." Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they were tears of happiness. "You already have." The months passed, and the mansion was no longer a cold, empty shell. Laughter filled its halls, the twins growing stronger and more curious with each passing day. Mira's art found new life as she began sketching and painting again, creating pieces inspired by her journey. Ivan, once consumed by his need for control, learned to embrace the chaos and joy of their new life. One sunny afternoon, as the twins played on a soft mat in the garden, Mira turned to Evan. "Are you happy?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. He looked at her, then at their children, his expression softening. "I never thought I could be this happy," he admitted. "You've given me something I didn't even know I needed. A family, a future." Mira smiled, her heart full. "And you've given me hope. I think that's all I ever needed." As they leaned into each other, their love was evident, not perfect, but real, built on trust, forgiveness, and the courage to face the unknown together. And so their story begins, not with the contract that brought them together, but with the family they chose to create. What did you think of Evan and Mira's journey? Do you believe in second chances, or that fate plays a hand in bringing people together? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves a good tale of love and redemption. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. What would you name the twins if they were yours? Drop your favorite names in the comments. We'd love to hear them.